So let's look at Node in this common JS module pattern and how singletons work in that environment. Now I've created a repository, just a simple repository that has one method called save. And I've added just an integer number to this repository called call that's going to keep track of how many times that save method is called. And then when you call save, I'm just going to write out to the console saving whatever we've written, and called has been called however many times. Now we have a main.js, and this main.js is creating an instance of task handler. So task handler, if we look over here, creates an instance of the repository, and then task handler.save is just going to write out my repo.save. It's going to create a new task in the repo, hi from task handler. So every time I call save, it's just going to call my repo.save again. And then main's going to do the same thing. So right now, if I run this, my repo.save, I'm going to have 3 from main, and then I should have 4 from task handler. So when I run this, notice I get 2 newing up task repos. So I've created 2 instances of this task repo. And then I saved from main, called it 1, 2, 3, and then saved from task handler, hi from task handler, called 4 times. So we obviously don't have a singleton of my repository because I've got 2 different instances of this repository. One instance is sitting in main, this instance right here, and then task handler has an instance of my repo as well, but it has its own instance. Now, what CommonJS does, if we look at the Node documentation, is caches everything that is in a require. So if we look at caching, right here, the first paragraph, modules are cached after the first time they're loaded. Every call to a require of something, I'm going to get the exact same object returned. So this third paragraph is what we're doing right now. If you want to have the module executed code multiple times, export a function and call that function. So what I'm doing right now in my repo, module.exports in my repo, module.exports equals repo. I'm just exporting this function, and then I'm requiring main to execute that function in order to get a repository they can use. A lot of times what you'll see is a require, and then you just stick that at the end of it to execute it. So when I do that, what's being cached in the module export is the whole function. Now what I can do, and what a lot of people do, is I can execute that function in my module.exports. And when I execute that in my module.exports, I have effectively created a singleton of my repository. Because what Node.js is going to do is it's going to store that instance of this return object, this object right here that's returned, it's going to store this. And the closure around this function means called and save and all these things are going to stay the same. So now here, I don't have to execute it anymore. So I can get rid of a couple things. Let me change this around. Change that to my repo, get rid of that line, and over on task handler, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get rid of my repo and change that there. Now, the only thing I've changed is I'm not executing the function because I'm executing it over on my repo when I do my module.exports. Now, what that means is now when I run this, I have effectively created a singleton of my repository. So I'm only going to see one newing up task repo, and I'm going to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So when I run it now, I only have one newing up task repo, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on my execution. So that's a very clean, very simple way to create singletons on my Node side. And you see this happen a lot, especially if you're doing Mongoose or MongoDB or Express. Module.exports usually will export either a repo like that, or I could actually new it up and do new repo, and it's going to work the same way. And you'll see this a lot as you look at packages. A lot of packages will just execute a new instance of whatever it is they're doing, and they have effectively, because of the way Node handles their modules, they have effectively created a singleton of that object.